Welcome back, everybody, to the Military Retirement Podcast. If you haven't been here before, my name is John McConnell. I am a veteran from the Army. My co-host, who is not with us today, a veteran from the Marine Corps, and we run the Military Retirement Podcast. Victor also runs the Green Logbook, and we talk about veterans issues. We bring veterans on with us to talk about things. We talk to nonprofits. We talk to different various organizations that have resources for you to use in your transition to civilian life. And today we want to kind of dive into a thing. I want to just rewind it back a little bit and talk about real quickly when you first came into service, your first term in the military, and coming out of maybe AIT or whatever they call it, depending on the service organization, your first service school that you go to after your basic initial training. And then you come to your first duty station. There's a few things that'll probably stick out in most people's minds at that first duty station, right? It's your first real taste of like freedom in the military, because up to that point, you've been training with whether it's drill sergeants or instructors or whoever, and you've been in a very tight regimented kind of schedule, and you've had to go places and be at different places and march and do all those fun things in a lot of cases. But once you get on the ground at your first duty station, there's a few things you'll remember. One of those things would probably be like, just the fact that people talk to you a lot differently. You have access to a dining facility that you can actually eat at, that you can actually take what you want and put on your plate and eat at, which is a great thing. You get freedom of choice again. And then once you step outside the gates of that first duty station, in most cases all around the world, these are a few things that you're going to run into. So you're going to probably see a tattoo parlor nearby where you can get tattoos. Tattoos is a military thing for sure. There's usually like a car salesman that's selling used cars, old junk cars, lemon lot. Yeah, you might call it a lemon lot, but that's usually more on base, where you'll buy your first car if you haven't had a car before, or your first car as you're in the military. And then you'll run into maybe a bar or a pub or a pool hall where you get to go hang out with people on the weekends. And then one other thing beyond that, as you go further down the street away from the gate, you'll run into a few different financial organizations that are set up to give you money to fund these activities that you want to do, usually at a very, very high interest rate. I know the government's kind of like tried to regulate it a little bit here and there. And of course, as financial organizations grow and expand, they learn how to get around these things, and they learn how to work the system so that they can get the most money out of, the military members who need that money for whatever they're trying to fund, whether it's buying a car or just spending money on whatever, vacation. Maybe it's money to go take emergency leave, who knows? But you'll get that money at a very, very high cost. And so today what we're going to dive into is some of the ways that these kind of organizations and these different financial instruments still play a part in veterans' lives, even at the 10-year, 20-year, 30-year mark, where they're offering financial services and you are getting a lot of fees on top of that. You're getting a lot of extra fluff in the background of your financial services that you're looking to use to build your wealth, to build your portfolio, to build savings and things like that. And today we've got a repeat offender on the podcast, Mr. Josh Cantrell. He's going to be talking with us. He's a financial advisor and very smart guy when it comes to finances and things like that. And he's talked on the podcast about this stuff before, but we're going to dive into some specifics today. So welcome back to the show, Josh.
Hey, John, appreciate you guys having me on again. I'm excited to tackle this topic. It's something near and dear to my heart. For those that don't know, I've been in the finance, a retired Army dude, retired in 2023, but I've been doing financial services for the last 4 years, started 2 years before I retired, learning so that I could make a smooth transition, follow my wife into the business. I'm ready to go wherever you want to go. But John, I will tell you, it used to be you come out of the gate and you've got, like you said, the pawn shop, tattoo shop, liquor store, and payday loan or something like that. And you could teach your soldiers, hey, to watch out for that. Don't go to a car lot and get a 20-something% interest rate on that, the 3x owned sports car that you want. But now with really where we're at with the social media age and really LinkedIn and platforms like that, it's not just out of the gates anymore. You have to really have 360-degree um, awareness of what's around you and what you're getting into. So I yeah, I'll stick with you on the conversational piece, but I will just lead off with saying, I'm in the financial industry, and there's a ton of good people who work in the financial industry, all aspects from lending on the mortgage side to lending for cars, lending for things that people need. There are also benevolent organizations out there that are associated with the services that do interest-free loans like I'm an Army guy, so I'm familiar with the Army side, but like AER, for example, Army Emergency Relief, they do a lot of great work in taking care of people and making sure they're, for those, like what you mentioned, when somebody needs help with a plane ticket to get back home for an emergency or something like that. So by no means are we going to attack the entire industry today, but we are going to talk about a few things that have really risen to prominence over the last few years, really since COVID, and some of the dynamics that have pushed that. One of the biggest being work from home opportunities, right? And I'm not hating on that. I work from home. It is where I office out of, but it comes with a lot of, I guess, challenges as well. So if you have any opening remarks or questions, we can go there. And if not, I'll kind of start my diatribe a little bit.
Yeah, no, I want to really kind of just from the perspective of somebody at the 2 to 3 to 5 year mark getting ready to exit the military. Again, whether you've been in for, dozens of years or you've been in for a handful of years, at some point you're going to make that decision whether you're going to stay in. And actually right now, even despite the government shutdown, even despite the things that are going on, I would say right now is a great time to just stay put, give it a couple more years if you're planning on getting out, for various reasons. Of course, it's a individual choice for anybody who wants to get out, but if you're trying to get out right now, plan ahead for sure, but you might even take the option or put the option on the table to stay in for 1 or 2 or 3 more years, just so that you can make sure that you've gave yourself enough runway to be able to set things up, at least financially, if not just everything else that you got to deal with coming off of active duty service, looking for jobs, figuring out where you want to live, getting a mortgage if you don't have one already, or figuring out if you're going to relocate to another location. But I think for the interest of this conversation, I would say if we could just touch on real quickly, like as far as setting yourself up for financial success coming out of the military, and we'll start from the perspective of maybe somebody who doesn't have a ton of TSP or a ton of investments, a ton of cash saved up, maybe they're still paying debt down. From that perspective, why don't we look at what are some of the things that are probably the most important things, especially in that last 2 or 3 years before getting out of the military, to think about while trying to get your financial stuff in order so that you can give yourself a nice, smooth landing coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building a runway, right? Like we hear that a lot. I think a lot of people underestimate how much of a change it will be. And so with our GY era veterans who's retiring right now and making that decision a lot of times, or pretty much primarily, that's who's making that decision right now. There are people that are going to listen to this. They're in that 2 or 3 year window. First thing, debt is not your friend in any way, sense, or shape or form. If you can attack it, attack it. The problem with what we see in consumer debt, especially, and so we're not talking your mortgage, but when we're talking car payments and credit card payments, which typically are the 2 biggest drivers of veteran debt, and sometimes personal loans, you want to attack those things, but that can be a long runway to take on, right? Like whether you take the debt snowball approach, which is something that Dave Ramsey teaches, that's what I used to get out of debt about 15 years ago, where you attack things. You want to eliminate debt because that's outgo, right? Like you have, to any financial equation, you have 2 basic factors. You have income and you have outgo. And then on the equal side, that's going to put you in the positive or it's going to put you in the red. It's as simple as that. Now, it can get very complicated doing the income and outgo, there. So as you're making that decision, I will say retirement is a very personal decision, and timing may be right for some people for a lot of reasons other than financial. Whether that's some folks who are retiring medically and really don't have much of a choice, or if it's just time for one reason or another, whether it's a family situation or you're just tapped out, or hey, maybe you're at the 28, 29, 30-year mark and you're hitting your RCP and it's just time to go. So maybe you have to start thinking. And the biggest thing there is attack your debt, but also start building your runway. Because what John is talking about is often what catches people by surprise. When you retire, even if you're going into a situation where you have a job lined up or something like that, when you exit the military, there is going to be a break in pay for several weeks, if not months. You're not going to be getting the tax-free pay that you once got. That's another thing that people sometimes fail to really calculate, is the tax-free benefits of being on active service, which primarily comes in the form of BAH and BAS. But BAH is not an insignificant number for most folks. It can be, $20,000+ of your income is not taxed. And so you're kind of used to, even though you may see a number on your LES, your income equivalent on the outside is actually higher because you're going to be taxed to get to that same number, if that makes sense. And so when you're building that runway, it really starting to save, having money set aside for the transition period. There may be things like what John was saying that really play into that. If you're going to move locations, there may be travel expenses that are factored into that. There may be other expenses that are factored into it that you're just not really calculating that can be significant, chunks. And so that 2 to 3 year mark out, start setting aside a savings. I would say minimally $10,000 set aside by the time you're retiring. And that's like, hey, I was able to slap this together. I would probably lean 20 or 25,000. And depending on where you live, depending on what you make, you're talking several months of income potentially, right? What if there's an issue with DFAS? We're seeing this right now. Things processing a little bit slower. I was answering a question on the Military Retirement Group Facebook page the other night, and you're seeing things are happening. People are getting paid, but there may be a situation of government shutdown that just throws a speed bump into things, and you want to be prepared. So that would be my first thing, is savings, so that you have 2 to 3 months of your income in a savings account, that should you not get any income over that period, you don't have to go into an emergency situation.
Right. So you're talking about liquid funds, basically.
Liquid somewhere, whether access to it, that's not hard. You're not having, people, when you talk about financial portfolios, and if there's 100 people listening right now, there's 100 different portfolios. There may be cash available in places that you have set aside, but we typically don't want to touch retirement savings, investments if we can afford not to. But at the same time, you have to really calculate out. The one thing you don't want to do is go put your transition on a credit card. Because, it will not feel good, and it's going to make the early part of retirement a lot more difficult than it needs to be. Now, the good news is,
go ahead. No, I was going to say, if I had to choose between putting it on a credit card and taking out like investment funds, I would probably choose the investment funds, just because the tax hit is not as bad as taking the credit card in most cases, right? Yeah,
you'll be okay on the tax hit. And really, there's a way to structure it. And again, talk to a professional, right? If you need advice, talk to a professional. This is one where you don't want to go talk to unless they're a professional, your uncle or your dad or somebody like that, who may not be well versed in how to do that math. And there's plenty of people who, like me, who do that. We sit down with folks, and yes, we sell financial products. We do a lot of stuff, but we also help people just tackle financial planning. It's full spectrum. And so that would be my thing, is sit down with a professional 2 to 3 years out. Hey, this is what I'm getting ready to do. This is where I'm at. You need someone that you can be honest with about your finances. That's not always easy, especially if your finances aren't beautiful, so that they can help you make an informed decision. That would be my piece of advice there, is to iron it out, do the math, right? There's, like you were mentioning, the tax math on an investment or a credit card. I can't think of an investment, taking an investment and taking the tax hit that wouldn't beat, you know, if you end up having to pay 18% interest on a $25,000 balance on a credit card, and the length of time that it takes most people to catch up on those kinds of things, is just a part of it. So yeah, now do the math, understand your math. That's the biggest mistake I see over and over again, is people not understanding their numbers. They have a general sense. Most people have a general sense. But I've sat down with a lot of people this year from every age group, from their 20s, which not very many of my clients are in their 20s, but in their 30s and 40s and 50s, families in their 60s and even 70s, who are having to look at things and taking, people in their 60s, taking an honest look at their finances for their first time in their life and going, oh my goodness, if I make this decision, the income outgo on the equal sign, I end up with a red number. And they look at me and they go, what do I do about this? And then we really have to start turning screws, or, talk about, lowering outgo. And that's often tied to lowering a standard of living to some degree. So that's a hard conversation. But I say all that just to say there are people that can help you with it if you need help putting that math together. But doing the honest math and doing the math is key to knowing if you're prepared or not.
Yeah, and that's just in general. Like if you want to be able to lose weight, if you want to be able to put on muscle mass, if you want to be able to buy a car, if you want to be able to do anything in life, like you literally just have to sit down and quantify what you're looking at, so you can understand, okay, here's the goal I want to get to. Here's where I'm at right now. Here's the, the delta between the two. And here's the kind of steps that I need to take, and understand that steps aren't always linear. Like even if you've got a good financial plan set in place, like there's things that are going to happen. There's financial crashes, there's market meltdowns, there's inflation rates going up and down. There's different things that can happen that can affect some of those things. So just understand that it's not a straight path ever. Like there's going to be bumps in the road along the way, and you're just going to have to get comfortable with those bumps. But before you do any of that, like you need to sit down and understand where you're at, where you want to go, and then how do you get there, and try to make it as realistic as possible, so you're not over calculating or overestimating what you think is going to happen, and then the reality is it's not happening that way month over month over month over month, and then you get frustrated and you're like, screw this, I'm not going to do it anymore, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you couldn't have said that any better. To steal a term that we all heard way too often for 20 years, it's a 360-degree battlefield, and the second you have a good plan, you're gonna take a punch from somewhere. It's just the way it works. It's the way life works. That is life. But as when you have an emergency fund or you have some stuff set aside, it seems like you have a lot less emergencies. There's some truth to that. A good plan and solid backing and understanding your plan, so that you understand the big picture of where you're trying to go. That way little things don't trip you up, can be extremely helpful. But yeah, it's not linear.
Yeah, and I'll say
it's not a linear thing at
all. No, not at all. And one other thing I'll just kind of throw in there is like that's the kind of the cool thing, at least what I've over my time of building my relationship with money. And really that's what I want to kind of frame it as, is building a relationship with money, because I mean, it's part of your life. It's part of your everyday, tasks and what you do and how you do things. So I take it from that angle, as building a relationship. But the funny thing about building money or doing anything with money is if you overestimate. So if you add extra padding to your plan, say you want to save $100 a month, and you're like, you know what, I can actually save $300 a month. So let me just save $300 a month, even though my target is 100. It's not gonna hurt you in the long run, because you can just take that cash out as long as you've got it liquid, right? But the interesting thing about that is as you're trying to put savings away, put 6 months of money away or 12 months of money away, which is a super smart plan. And I can't even imagine a world now where I don't have, you know, a certain amount of money in the bank. Like that just makes me nervous when there's not a certain amount of money. They used to make me nervous when it was getting close to zero. And now that I've changed my relationship with money, it's like, now it's, if there's not a certain amount of money in the bank at all times, I get nervous. And I tell my wife, I'm like, I don't know if we're going to be okay. She's like, what do you mean? Like, we're below this level. She's like, but there's still a lot of money. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's fine. But I would say just even adding that extra padding, if you can, really will save you, because there's going to be, as you said, and as we've talked about, things are going to come up, right? Somebody's going to need some help from your family, or, you know, an extra bill comes in you weren't expecting, or the car breaks down, like whatever, you know, at a bare minimum, I would say, if you don't have the cash set aside to purchase a used car in the event that your car completely just blows up, like the engine just goes completely dead and you can't fix it, it's not repairable. If you don't have the cash set aside to just go buy a car to create a new form of primary transportation, like that would be my bare minimum. That would be the ultimate, like bare minimum of what needs to be in the bank.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's the emergency fund 101. You know, you start with, but then the idea is that you build it up. Now there's a cap to that, you know, depending on who you're talking to and which, you know, how they operate on, what their foundational elements of their financial planning are. But an emergency fund, a well-funded emergency fund, is definitely a huge cornerstone to anybody that's worth their salt in giving financial advice or financial planning or anything like that. And I feel you. That's something, you know, I come from very humble roots in South Carolina, and so money for me was just a foreign concept. Any amount of money was a foreign concept. It was just, hey, some people have money and most of the rest of us don't. But that I learned over time that really the biggest differentiator is how you treat money and how you, like you said, save. And then what do you put an emphasis on? I was a typical early 20s young NCO in the Army. My money went out fast. It did not get saved very quickly. And then luckily I got around, in one of my deployments, we did Financial Peace University while I was there. It changed the way that I sense money and how I treat it. And from that point forward, have done very well as far as saving and doing the exact same thing. How my personal relationship with money goes. And a lot of times when we're starting to deconstruct financial issues, it's as much that psychological relationship with money that's involved as is the actual nuts and bolts math. That's a huge part of it. So I think that's a very, very good thing to be talking about and be aware of. And there will be people listening to this that they'll start to nod their head. They'll say, yeah, either I have a great relationship with money, or they'll be able to relate to not having one and then building one, or they'll say, man, I hate talking about it. I hate, you know, for one reason or another. There, you know, there's a whole faction of the world that says, you know, money is the root of all evil. And it's, you know, I think it breaks down to more of the love of money is the root of all evil. But as a person once told me, life is going to pitch you things that cause emotions. The ability, having money, it will not make life any easier. But in some instances, it's going to help a lot. You know, as this person said, I like crying, or I don't like crying, but it's a lot easier crying in my G-Wagon than it was in my Civic. And they were making a very specific reference, but you know, it didn't save them from the emotional event, but it did allow for a more comfortable landing.
Yeah, it's yeah, I've heard a similar sentiment about would you rather be broke or be broke and crying, or be broke or be crying in your Lamborghini.
Yeah.
So I've heard that a few different ways. I want to jump into the MLM style financial companies, how they work, and what people need to know when it comes to when they're reaching out to financial investment institutions to be able to set up financial investments for themselves, for their families, some things that they need to look at, what they need to be aware of, what kind of red flags, those kind of things.
Absolutely. So, if you don't know, that's how I got my start in the financial industry. I got recruited into I will call them recruiting based, for a lot of reasons. They're recruiting based financial industry. So, we're going to take a quick step back and to understand the financial industry and why you see so many commercials and things like that, just like any business and in sales, the number one thing that these companies have to survive are what we call leads. It doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, anything like that. But in the financial industry, it's particularly tricky unless you're one of the very, very big companies. People don't just typically show up and say, "Hey, Josh, I'm so and so, and I would like you to handle my financial planning." And so in the financial world, leads, people who are interested in the service you are offering, are extremely important. Why does that? How does that tie in? So the recruiting model, or that is a lead source. The idea being that you go out and you recruit people into your company, you pitch them, you sell them the dream, so to speak, and then with the ultimate goal of doing business with that person. If they make it in the business or not, right? And so we'll talk about how the pitch actually works. Isn't usually of much concern to the person recruiting them in, is simply how many conversations can they have with someone who might be a qualified candidate to do business with them. And so, right, not everybody has investable assets. So the recruiting model companies, and there's a lot of them. And if I'm not going to go into naming any companies or anything like that today, but what we're going to talk about is the recruiting model. So you'll get this on LinkedIn. You'll see it on a lot of the career websites out there where you're going to look for jobs. You'll see postings, and they usually go something along the lines of unlimited income opportunity, work from home, work as much or as little as you want to. They really, really put it out there. And it's one of those things where you have to go back and tell yourself, if it sounds be too good to be true, it could be. Now, I'll caveat that with this. There are people in every one of these companies who are very successful. Seven-figure incomes, successful. Eight-figure incomes, successful. And so I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not telling you don't do it. I'm saying be educated. It is a recruiting model. And so the emphasis is not placed on financial planning or advising, although you have to learn that stuff. You have to become licensed. You have to do all that kind of stuff to get there. So you have a minimum threshold, a minimum bar that must be met. But the idea there is that you grow a big organization, and so that you can, right, like it's the same thing. And this is how they pitch it, right? Josh, you have 50 working hours in a week. But if you have 10 people working with you, you have 500 working hours in a week. And what could you possibly do with that? And if they're doing everything and you make a percentage of what they make, then, this unlimited income cap dream is there for you. And that's what gets most people. And they show you big incomes. I mean, there's a lot of, they show what they make. And in the financial industry, you can hit some home runs, and there can be some big numbers attached. And for someone looking for a job or looking for an income opportunity, and you see somebody just made $30,000 in 1 month or in one transaction, you go, wow, that's impressive. What often gets glossed over is how hard that is to do. And when you have these recruiting-based models, you have to build a massive organization to be doing that kind of stuff. And with that comes a lot of what did not feel good to me, which is recruiting. And so you're on LinkedIn, you're on, what's the Glass website, whatever, I forget the name of it, but there's a bunch of them, career-based websites, Career Builder, that kind of stuff. And you're on those websites, and you're putting job ads out, and you're literally just doing interviews with people to see if they're a fit. And so think about who is on those websites looking for an opportunity and that kind of stuff. Oftentimes when someone is looking for a job, the last thing they need to do is spend several $1,000s to get into a new business, because everything is on you, as well as then be pretty, hard sold on the products or services that that particular company offers. So I'm gonna take a breath there, John, just to make sure I stay on track and say that that's kind of upfront how they operate. And so I'll go into the military and federal piece of this in a second, but I want to take a breath and just make sure that made sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, I've growing up in a middle class environment, lower middle class environment, prior to coming into the military. My dad, God bless him, he was always out looking for the next thing to do. And so through that, you end up in these different organizations. Like I'll name these off because these aren't directly related to what we're talking about, but like the Amways of the world, that's probably the biggest one. And that's, more of a 90s thing. I don't know how big Amway is today, but it's basically that model and taking that model and then transposing it onto financial investment instrumentation and structuring, right? So yeah, if you get into a situation where you need to get recruited to do something and then bring in other people under you, recommendations for a company is a big ask. It's a big ask for us as a podcast, right? As a small entity that's, trying to expand the knowledge base of veterans. We don't necessarily have to ask, like, I don't have to ask you like, hey, can you share this 5 times this week? And if you know 5 people that might be interested in the podcast, can you share it with them? Like, that's kind of ingenuous to me. And that's why we generally don't do it. Like, we're just starting to get to the point where we're asking for, figuring out how to structure, sponsorships and being able to pay for all this stuff that we're doing because it's not free. But from the financial investment perspective, right, it's a similar thing where you're basically building up a structure underneath you that's already building a structure that's underneath somebody else, and you're just kind of trickling up the percentage points up the ladder until it gets to the top of the ladder. So to me, that's not investing. To me, it's just building an organ. It's like selling Kirby vacuum cleaners, basically.
Well, yeah,
like you're trying to get money from it, but no, go ahead.
No, you could not be more right. It's I watched it, so stayed in it for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and just because we did well enough, right? Like it was because what do they do? The first clients that they want you to go get is in from your hot market, is what it's called. So people who know you, that trust you, and those kinds of things. And I'll say you're working with the big insurance companies or the big financial providers and that kind of stuff in our world. And so that part doesn't change much. It's just the internal work. And so I finally just got sick of the recruiting. I got sick of talking to people who I'm trying to show them this outlet, but I would listen to their situation as an empathetic person. All they needed was a job with a salary. The idea of, right, like you guys run a business. I don't have to tell you this. It ain't cheap to run a business. It is outgo first usually, and outgo for an extended period of time before you're ever in the black. It's just the way that business works. You go back and study businesses through history, and they work that way. And so that was why we left. But on the inside, the other thing is there's all these can't miss events, or a lot of times you'll hear them referred to as like a meeting of the minds, or we're going to sit down and really get sharp on this stuff, and it's travel to a destination. We had an annual conference we went twice to in Vegas, right? And so and it's billed as you can't miss this. It's these world-class speakers, and some of these companies are massive. You're 50,000, 60,000 agents. They bring in top-notch speakers, and I do not. Right. Like I learned a lot from that. I got to sit in a room sometimes with some fantastic speakers, professional speakers, and take away things. But I also I watched a lot of those same speakers on YouTube, and I didn't have to fly somewhere and spend $1,200 on a hotel for the week and try to figure out childcare. And if you never pushed a stroller down the strip in Vegas in July, man, I have, right, and all in the pursuit of a dream. And then finally left. But yeah, they're structured in that way. And I will say, I've got some people I know, I call them colleagues. I got a few that I still consider friends, and they do well. They do very well, but they're in it constantly. It wasn't a lifestyle that Amanda and I, my wife, who's also in business with me, wanted to pursue forever. We said, hey, we're smart folks. We understand the base, how the financial industry works. Let's go hang a shingle and start our thing. So MVMT Financial is what we did. But I will tell you, if I had those 2 years and that, man, travel and, go into these great events where, you're getting together, but then you get there and it's just people drinking and staying up till 2 a.m. And that's right. Like, I'm not 25 anymore. And if you still do that, like, I'm not judging you, but that's just not my life anymore. And not really having a ton of takeaways. After about 3 or 4 times of doing that and the plane tickets to wherever they were, and just the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And then don't get me started on what really prompted the exit for us was some contractual disputes from some of the big players at the particular company that we were with, and how the larger company put their thumb down and said, hey, even though your contract says one thing, like, so in the insurance world in particular, owning your book of business is a big deal, right? My clients are my clients, because it's hard to get clients. And when they stepped in and said, hey, we know the contract says that, but in all actuality, if you leave us, we're keeping your clients, and we're going to keep that income from the insurance companies that we do business with rolling into us. And the litigation that was tied to that, right? Like, if you don't know, I'm a JAG NCO is what I was in the Army. So the legal side of things, once I saw the litigation get ugly, I said, yeah, this ain't for us no more. So we did that. And I'm looking, I see Navy cop in there. Yeah, 3 out of 5, they're trying to recruit, and that's what they're doing. And this is, when they start you down that path, you get in, you get licensed, and the first thing they have you do is recruit. Before you've ever done one piece of financial business, or you truly understand what you're doing, I'd say that's your big red warning flag. And that's why you see so many job advertisements out there. Is LinkedIn allows so many free ones. Career Builder allows so many free ones. Now, the second that Career Builder or LinkedIn pick up that you're pushing a recruiting-based model, they'll shut you down. But that's why you see so many. That's why you get so many DMs. If you throw an open to work banner on your LinkedIn photo, green thing, be prepared. And why military and why federal employees, or why they're looking for people who have assets, people who would make good clients. And so they know, coming out of the military, some people have a TSP. Some people they need the life insurance, or they want the life insurance. And so they're just looking for, a qualified lead. I'll break it down to terminology, right? That's used in business throughout the world. And it's a qualified lead source that they don't have to pay for, because a lot of these folks that are trying to recruit you are not making very much money, because the folks that are at the top aren't doing a lot of recruiting. They're managing their organization by that point.
Yeah. So let's shift over to, I mean, that's a ton of information, and I'm sure we'll touch on a few of those points as we continue into this conversation. I want to dial it back to veterans who are going to do something with their TSP, because that's probably, like you just mentioned here at the end, that's probably one of the key factors. TSP, I would say, if you have a retirement from the military, that would be another one. And then if you have VA disabilities, which is a whole nother rabbit hole that we've talked about on many other shows, as far as people charging exuberant amounts of money to get you your VA ratings. But let's dial in on TSP specifically. And as far as, so we have been covering, and let me see if I can pull it up as you tackle this, but we have been covering like the bill in Congress that's trying to get into play. I think there's like 10 or 12 people on the bill right now, so it's really, in comparison, the one that's going to cover folks for the next shutdown, or at least for this fiscal year, is like 200 plus people within Congress that are supporting that bill. So got a long stretch ahead of us as far as getting the TSP access for veterans beyond military service, which would be an incredible thing. And we would love to help push that any way we can. But for those who don't, if you're trying to do something with your TSP and you don't know what to do with it, or if you need some advice on how to maybe shift those funds, because you can just leave it in there, right? It's not that the TSP account goes away. The TSP account stays there. You can still access it. You can still log in. You can still look at it. You can check the balances. But once you break service, then you don't have access to actually put funds into the TSP. So you can, by all means, leave the TSP there and let it sit. But if you need to take that money out, or if you want to roll it into some other investment vehicle, or maybe just portion of it, I don't know exactly how that works. But as far as TSP options and what are some things that people can do, and what are some things that people need to look out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, first thing, you can leave it exactly where it's at and it'll be just fine, depending on how you have it put together. Now, the TSP is designed to be a supplemental retirement income, fully understanding how inflation works. And when the 401k was born, and now we have blended retirement that's going to take over. You know, we still have high three retirement as the majority of retirees coming out right now, but blended retirement is going to take over. And so the TSP is a 401k like investment avenue for active duty service members and federal employees. And it's on the active duty side, it's just kind of a bonus. It at least until the blended takes over. But for federal employees, it's a big part of the three prongs of retirement. So the first being your FERS retirement, right? So the Federal Employee Retirement System number, that's a calculation that you do, but it's a pension. And then 2 being the TSP and 3 being Social Security. Now for veterans, a little bit different, right? You have your high 3 retirement folks. We'll talk about that now. So you'll have your retirement number. If you have VA, and it's the GY era and whatever VA amount coming in, that's an income amount, but that is for your disabilities. That's not necessarily for your retirement or retirement planning or anything like that. The TSP is your ability to supplement that. And so TSP is the idea that you save money over time. It's exposed to the markets. It grows over time. And then down the road, you can take from it to supplement your income in retirement. So after age 59 and a half, so that you don't have a 10% penalty if you're going to access it. And then also Social Security. Now, of our generation and younger, there's a lot of mixed feelings about Social Security, whether we think it's going to be there, whether we think it's going to be there in its current construct. I will tell you, when you do the calculations on it, and there's a lot of these out there, big studies that have been done on it, that math is not good math, meaning that account runs out of money in its current construct. And so that's why you hear the argument and the protection of Social Security and that kind of stuff. We do a lot of, my wife is a Social Security advisor, and she does a lot of advising to Americans who are eligible, so age 62 or above, or if they're in a special situation. But I will tell you that piece is a big piece of the planning. Now back to the TSP. Your TSP will be just okay where it's at, but moving it could be beneficial to you in different situations, or just where you're at and how much control you like, that kind of stuff. You can roll it over into a like account. So in TSP, we actually have 3 buckets. You have a traditional TSP, a Roth TSP, and then one that breaks most financial folks' brains is the tax exempt bucket, because tax exempt doesn't really exist anywhere else. And so that one typically is one that military members have, right? When you're deployed, your money goes into a tax exempt bucket. And so you can move your funds partial or in whole, to a like account. So a like financial product, whether that be an investment account, whether that be a, a 401k style thing or something like that, or into what I specialize in annuities. So when you're looking at protecting that nest egg, we put it in protection and growth. You can do that. And so we move it into an annuity, which is it's going to continue to grow, but you can use it then when you're ready, beyond the, at the appropriate age, turn on income. So oftentimes we're looking to protect, grow, and then use it for income down the road. And if you never use it for income, then, you can pass it on to a beneficiary. The other thing there's what we call, when you're, because I'm sure we got some savvy folks on here, the RMD age. So required minimum distribution age. Once you reach that, TSP, annuity, 401k, doesn't matter where it's at, you have to take a certain amount out every month, because these are what we call qualified retirement accounts. And so when does it make sense to move your TSP? Well, it depends. When you're leaving the military, again, if you're comfortable with the TSP, you understand it, you've been doing it, it's a good time. If you meet with a financial person, they're probably going to show you a lot of other avenues where you have more control and more options. The one thing that TSP is somewhat limited on is its options, right? Like there's not a ton within it that you can do. You have an international fund, you have a C fund and an S fund, so large cap and small cap stocks, and then you have a G fund, which is cash. Now their life cycle funds, the L funds, are just a blend of those other funds depending on the target retirement age that you have. And so they adjust, right? And it's based on a mix of stocks and bonds, or stocks and safer securities and that kind of stuff. Again, every situation is different there. This year, the I fund, the international fund, has performed over the last 12 months very well. It's up 21%, I think, at the end of last month. I send out, so if you don't follow me on LinkedIn, this will be my plug, my only plug. Go follow me on LinkedIn. Every month I post the TSP performance. And I talk about TSP rollover opportunities. But when you have it sitting there, and the market goes up, the market comes down, in the TSP, it is exposed to loss potential. Right now, I've talked to people who are just crushing it, but several months ago we were in the red, and people losing significant sums of money just based on it. So in the rollover area, the biggest thing is understand what you're going into and understand what your target is. What are you trying to do? If you have $500,000 sitting in your TSP and you say, okay, I like that, I don't want to go below that number. If I roll it over into an annuity, I know I'll never go below 500,000, but over the next 10 years, I might be able to turn it into, a significant gain. I don't want to speak specifics, but, based on market performance and stuff, but I'm protected from any risk, then someone like me who does annuities might be the right option. If you want to just get it back into the market, but you want to put it in something where you got a lot more options, then you might want to talk to somewhere like Vanguard or somewhere like that, where you can roll it over into an index fund. And so, again, I'll just plug, speak with a professional, speak with someone that you have a good feel for and that you trust. I would say be wary. And I hate to say be wary, because I do business on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a business-to-business platform. It's a business-to-consumer platform. I see people get upset about that. Guys, LinkedIn is more than just a job posting platform. That's something that I see all the time. Hey, I'm here to get a job. It's like, hey, there's a lot of businesses that operate on LinkedIn. It is a business platform. So if someone like me reaches out to you, and I always try to do it in a very, very unaggressive manner, but I've got 9,000 connections now, and I try to say hello to everyone and introduce myself. And why? Because business is hard, and getting clients is not easy. And so I try to build a trusting relationship and not just be some dude on LinkedIn. And every now and then I'll get, I'm looking for a job, and it's, I don't hire. I'm not recruiting. I do not do a recruiting-based model. One day I will expand, but I have to get there first. We do referral things. We do some cool things for referrals and stuff. And I'm glad you mentioned the sponsorship stuff earlier, because as we grow, we want to do things that benefit our community. So, like with Vic and John and the Military Retirement Podcast, if this is your first time listening, go back and listen to some of the other stuff. Get involved in the Facebook group. This is a place of good information that has been vetted from people that have been vetted. You're not going to get the sharks and all those folks. But yeah, so that's my spill on the TSP stuff. You have options. Talk to a professional, and again, how does it fit into your big picture? Because that's a lot of people look small picture with their finances. They look for quick wins, and really it's about the long game. It's about what is your overall destination, and then how do we build that pathway to get there, so that when life nips at you, like we discussed at the beginning, you don't get tripped up by the million little, because life will pinprick you to death, but where you stay on target and on time and on track to do the things you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's I'll throw this in there. It's when it comes to savings and figuring out what to do. Usually, not always, but usually, at least I find myself more and more nowadays answering in this way. If I'm faced with two options that are both equally good, so you said short-term, long-term. Short-term meaning, throwing some money in the bank in savings account or in a, wherever it needs to go, depending on your situation in your financial journey, or thinking long-term as far as, annuities, Roth investments, rolling over your TSP, reinvesting and tax loss harvesting and all those wonderful, fun financial terms. Usually my answer is both, right? My answer is yes, you need to think long-term future, but you also need to think short-term, what can I do now? Because there's different situations where it's going to require one or the other, right? You can't just go and grab some of your long-term investments to be able to help your sister-in-law because she lost her house in a fire, right, in California. But you can potentially grab, liquid assets that you have in a savings account or in some kind of CD or something that's been sitting there and maturing for a little while, and you've got the ability to pull that out as cash. Also, just other various investments, whether it be like, and these aren't investment advice things. I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to tell anybody to do anything, but people invest in different things, right? People buy Harley Davidsons, people buy gold and silver, people, I think they still do. So there's different things that people invest in, right? And depending on what the market says, those investments can either be good investments, bad investments, long-term investments, short-term investments, flipping opportunities, as they say. But yeah, generally my answer for any of that stuff is if both the options look okay, then my answer is yes. So, and that doesn't always get a smile, especially not from my wife.
Oh, absolutely. It's you have to plan for today. You have to be able to execute life today, and you also have to plan for tomorrow. And so it's a balance, and that's where having someone that you work with can be extremely helpful when you're saying how much this, that. People do, gold and silver. I mean, there's one out there, people invest in gold that's just maintained for them at some other place. And I'm of the kind of the thought process is if we get into a world where gold and silver are back as the king, you're probably going to want it in hand, not in a vault somewhere that someone promises you they have, and they just send you a ledger every month of what it's worth. So yeah, I sit down and dissect financial portfolios all the time, and you see all kinds of stuff, all kinds of things that people believe will take off, or entities, out there that will, if you're willing to give somebody money, they're usually going to take it. So again, be careful what you're getting into, but have a short-term plan, a long-term plan, and then somewhere when you have extra, what you're going to do with it. And sometimes it's like, people are like, I want to spend 10 grand on a vacation this year. Well, go do it. As long as you can afford it, go do it. but you don't know if you can afford it if you don't know, don't do the numbers. I'm not that guy. That's where I break from Dave Ramsey on a lot of things. Is because even though retirement age is this thing, like not everybody makes it to retirement age or beyond. So also don't forget to live life while you're pursuing all of these goals.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. My father, who I mentioned earlier in the show here, did not get to make it to retirement age, and unfortunately, yeah, it's a weird balance that you have to take. And again, like I said, it's a relationship that you have to build over time. It's like any other relationship. You can't just go on a first date and then be like, okay, well, we're gonna get married in weeks from now, so I hope you're prepared for it. You're the one. I've chose you. You have to build that relationship over time. You have to court your relationship with money the same way you would court your relationship with your wife or your husband or anything else. Friendships, same. One thing that we haven't really touched on, because we do this when we talk about financial planning and kind of moving money around and figuring out how to build wealth over time, or just build savings, or just build some kind of emergency exit plan as far as cash on hand for things that happen. One thing that we don't talk about a lot, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because this is another thing that kind of helped me better understand money, was on the front end, we're talking about putting money away, putting money in different investments, trying to earn some interest on it, trying to get some compound gains on that money. On the back end of that, for regular folks who maybe aren't financially savvy, or who haven't thought about this stuff, or who just simply haven't sat down and crunched the numbers and said, okay, here's where we're at. And that's why they make you do it when you go through the transition program, the TAP program. They make you sit down, you write down this Excel spreadsheet, and you put in all your stuff, and if you have a mortgage, and if you have a car, and what kind of money you have in savings, and all this stuff. What are your bills? What credit cards do you have? They do that for a reason, so that you can actually sit down, and what we've been talking about this whole time is get a snapshot of where you're actually at. But what I want to do is kind of hit on, and we can just do it shortly, quickly. It doesn't have to be a whole long diatribe about it, but talking about the back end of that, as far as how do you set yourself up financially to then be able to actually put money away? Because I think that's where a lot of people get caught up. I got caught up in that for many, many years. I'm sure many people do get caught up in it, because if you look at the military, the average military kind of, snapshot of average military members may or may not, but generally speaking, like, especially if you're in another duty location outside of the United States, in a lot of cases, they'll buy the new car. They'll, maybe have 2 new cars, depending on the household size. They've got a lot of amenities. They've got a lot of stuff. And I'm wondering if any of that played into your ability to then sit back, as well as doing like the debt snowball and things like that, going to financial university to try to figure out how to be better with money. Was any of that involved in that process, as far as getting rid of stuff, getting rid of wants and extra stuff that you don't use, not buying the newest, latest, and greatest toys, those kind of things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I guess to keep it somewhat brief, if you don't use it, you don't need it, sell it. Especially if you're in debt, right? Like, and that's the Dave Ramsey thing is sell so much stuff that the kids think they're next. But like, if you need cash and you have a bunch of stuff laying around and you don't use it, like, sell it. 2 is work when you're working aged. This is something we talk about a lot. It depends family to family. Every situation is different. I recognize that and acknowledge that. There are ways to make money out there when you're in the military. So one thing I always say is get smart on real estate, get smart on understanding the advantages you have as a service member in the real estate arena, because you can make money in real estate, but also be aware that you can lose a lot of money in real estate. I'm not a real estate investment person, so consult a qualified professional. But I will tell you, there are a lot of people who are in the military that have done well, and whether that's renting properties or buying and selling, you can do that now. That's stagnated some with the post 2020 housing costs, and folks that follow the real estate market, if you're a real estate agent on this, if you're a mortgage person looking at this, what's going on. It's tough out there for the real estate folks if you're not tracking. Very market dependent, but a lot of stagnation in the market. Market's not moving very much right now. It's because prices are high and they're not coming down, and investment rates have been high. We just did another a 0.25% cut, but that's not going to directly impact the market, right? Like that's the prime rate. So that's we could do a whole episode on that. But there are opportunities when you're on active duty to make additional money, and that's right. There's whether it's something like with me, I have in certain states I have a referral program. I pay for referrals, right, because it's a hard business to get leads. So you can make $100 just if you know somebody needs life insurance, and so that could go a long way. So the biggest thing is, right, it boils down to the income and outgo equation, and you want your income side of the equation to be larger than the outgo side. It boils down to that. If you have expendable income, it's what John was talking about earlier. How much are you saving for the short term and the long term, and how are you doing so? But look for opportunity. If you have a good idea, and you want to strike out and maybe start a side business or something, do it. There's the military. Being on active duty can make that very tough. But if you have a spouse that can run something like that, a little at home, and there's so many cool things you can do these days that aren't super high cost of entry or anything like that. So I would say, look for those opportunities, but again, the purpose of this show, also beware of things that sound too good to be true. If there's a veteran or somebody that's interested in the financial industry and you've contacted some of these folks or something, and you just want to know BS, let's talk. Let me talk to somebody. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Joshua Cantrell on LinkedIn. I talk to everybody for free. Just so you know, I get paid by commission from the companies I work with. So a conversation with me is not going to cost you any money, and I'll be glad to run through, especially if you're looking at a particular company. I can very quickly dissect. Usually I know who they are, and we can go into that, because you don't want what seems like an opportunity to make money to all of a sudden turn into, I spent $15,000 or $20,000 trying to break into this industry, and I now realize that it's not for me, or this construct is not for me.
Yeah, and it's also like on those same lines. If you are expected to invest a ton of money up front to be able to get into a thing to make money on the side as a side hustle, personally, I would steer away from it. Like personally, I would just steer clear of it, because there's so many different. If you break it down to the basics, like the bare basics, simple basics of making a side hustle work. It's from the Gary Vaynerchuk playbook. Like, go to a yard sale, take $100, go buy some stuff, put it on eBay, buy it for $1, sell it on eBay for $15 or $20, and turn your $100 into $1,000, and then just rinse and repeat and do that over and over. And if you want to scale up, then you spend $2,000 or $4,000 and turn that into 10x. And there's fees involved with that, and there's all kinds of putting the boxes together and boxing stuff up and sending it out and managing an eBay account, and like there's all kinds of stuff on the back end of that. There's no free lunch out there that I'm aware of, beyond just getting to retirement age and then retiring from the military. That's one kind of a free lunch. VA disabilities is kind of a free lunch, but you have to work hard for that as well. And it's not just go and check a bunch of boxes and get your VA disabilities, as some people in Congress have recently mentioned. But beyond that, like, there's no free lunches out there. And if you want to really just kind of get started, and again, short-term versus long-term versus is it a side hustle, or is it a second job, or is it something like that? And if you're married, then yes, of course, you've got potentially, if they're interested in, you've got a spouse who may or may not want to contribute or help contribute or do something, and they don't necessarily want to leave the house. Maybe, maybe they've got school-age kids at home, and you want to be able to bring them back and forth to school and pick them up and take them to recitals and take them to sports events and things like that. So a limited amount of time, but there's a lot of stuff you can do with a limited amount of time. I mean, we all have 168 hours a week, bottom line. And what you do at that time determines, what you get out of that time. And very, very much so, spending that time focusing on your family is really great use of time. Financially speaking, it may or may not be, but it's definitely a great use of your time. And then the next best thing you could do, second and third next best thing you can do is take care of your mental health, take care of your physical health, take care of your family's health, and then potentially see if you can do something on the side to offset money. And then at the same time, don't just take that money and spend it on stuff and eating out and whatever, right? Just try to think a little bit more thrifty if you can, because the thriftiness will then over the long term pay off and turn into a place of comfort, and a place where you'll realize, once you have money and you have comfort and you have money set aside and you've got money invested for the future, then you realize, like, I don't really need all this extra stuff that I really wanted before. Like, it's not that important. It just becomes less relevant in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. Love me some Gary V. Love Gary V. Yeah, there's so many things. And if you don't know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, very successful businessman, but literally started by flipping things and using Craigslist and eBay and that kind of stuff. So especially if you understand a niche out there, maybe you're into a certain kind of collectible or something, there's a market for everything. Usually you just got to understand it and understand when you're looking at things, what can make money, not make money, that kind of stuff. I did want to touch on one other thing, John, before we break from here, and that's right outside the gates of a lot of military installations. There's an organization. They have access to military installations. They don't do, I will say, bad work, but they are famous for recruiting people who are transitioning into their business to give financial services a try, see if it's a fit. Just be aware that organization is also recruiting you to get access to do your financial business. They have a high churn, and they sponsor a lot of stuff on bases. Because they have a lot of people on their board that are former GOs and stuff, they get access that other people wish they could get to things. So I would say another one that if you're doing things with them, they have a strong track record. But again, if they're trying to lure you into the financial services field, just know it is not easy. It's not quick money. You do have to learn. You do have to stay licensed. And then for anybody, this is the other thing I thought of while you were talking, that when you're running a business, this is what trips people up the most is not actually running the business. Business is hard. Making a profit in business is hard. But what trips people up isn't necessarily the business. It's the bookkeeping, and on the back end, the taxes. This is what financial folks, those who are successful and end up making money, a lot of times they will get, maybe they make $25,000 in a month, and that feels great. And then what do? They go spend it, and they forget that Uncle Sugar is going to come calling. And when you make a significant sum, that means it comes with significant taxes. So just be aware there that when you get into that world, always consult a tax professional when you are doing things to make money, so that you don't find yourself in a position that really hurts when Uncle Sugar comes calling. I've seen many people in the financial industry go down for this reason, simply because they make money, they spend money, and then they forget that Uncle Sugar always gets his cut.
Yeah, it's definitely it should be rule number one, right? I mean, if you're doing anything financial, and again, I'm not a financial advisor, I don't work in the financial sector, but if you're doing anything with money, at least from my personal perspective, you always have to calculate the taxes, and no matter what you're doing, right? So that should be like rule number one.
Should be. It absolutely should be. But I've seen it go the other way a lot, and it is. It can be a lure, you know, when someone lands a big deal or something. You know, congratulations, but the first thing they do is go on a little spending spree and forget, hey, you know, depending on your tax bracket, a certain amount of that needs to be set aside. So I feel like we've covered a lot of the ground today, John. I appreciate you having me on again. For the folks out there, this came because I read some comments a few weeks ago on a little side discussion that happened on a John and Vic conversational podcast. And so I hope it was useful for those folks. And then John and Vic, I'm sure you'll watch this at some point. Just truly appreciate what you guys are doing for the community, and excited to see you guys continue to grow. Thanks for having me on again. I'm happy to answer any last questions, but I think we covered the ground that you wanted to cover today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I really enjoy having you on. I really enjoy your expertise. Of course, you're an Army guy, so we just by default get along, I think. But yeah, it's just information that, and I know our podcast goes in many different directions. We talk about, you know, a couple weeks ago we were talking about saving sea turtles in, you know, in the Pacific somewhere, or no, in the Atlantic somewhere down south near the Gulf, I think is where it was. And now we're talking about financial planning and investments and stuff like that. But it all kind of wraps into this big bubble of just taking care of yourself, taking care of other veterans. That's the main reason why we're here. So great to have you on. Vic, hopefully we'll be back next week. We've got a full roster lined up for the next few weeks at least. I've been hammering people's LinkedIn inboxes and emails and trying to get people scheduled. Uncle Sugar. Yeah, no doubt. Missed that comment, but yeah, that's nice. Yeah, Uncle Sugar, always looking for your contributions. But no, it's been great to have you on. It's been great to talk about some of these topics. I'm glad we sparked a little bit of interest in the conversations that we've had previously. I'm hoping that that's what we do in the future as well, for not just yourself, but other veterans, other folks out there running nonprofits, other folks out there who are in charge of some benefits for veterans, to be able to come on the show, voice their concerns, give us some great information to pass out. And I'm going to pop this on the screen real quick just before I forget. If you're looking for Josh on LinkedIn, this is the official account, the Josh Cantrell. No, it's Josh Cantrell. I can grab the link as well and throw it in the chat. But if you're looking for his account, that's where he is. If you need to reach out, you are still on the West Coast, correct?
Still on the West Coast, but meet nationwide, licensed all over. So I will meet you where you're at. I do, like I said, I work from home, so, and I'm still an early riser guy. So if you need me in the morning on the East Coast, I'm happy to meet you. And I work with veterans, and hit me up on LinkedIn.
Sounds great, man. Well, thank you for taking the time out again, Josh. Always a pleasure. And if you ever want to come back on the show and hang out with us, man, you've always got an open invitation for me.
Appreciate it, John. Thanks. Look forward to seeing you guys grow. And yeah, thanks for having me on and sharing my thoughts with the audience.
Sounds good, man. Until next time, be safe out there. Take care of your families, and we will see you all later. Have a great one.